This is part 2 of the research paper introduction lecture. And we talked about what's next. Now we're going to talk about taking notes from sources. This is an extremely important part of the research paper process. And I will explain what I do to take notes from sources, and I just want you to listen and kind of absorb my process, and then think about how you can make this work for you. But first, let me tell you why this is so important. When you're writing a research paper, here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to have a paragraph for each source, a paragraph for a book you used, a paragraph about an article. That's not a research paper, that's a report. You also don't want to be writing this paper at the last minute and say, oh, I got to include information from 5 sources and drop a bomb from one in one paragraph and slap one in another one. Because your reader will feel shell-shocked, will feel hit in the face by these sudden sources that don't really make sense. It's very obvious when someone writes their paper that way. Instead, what you need to do is carefully gather the best information from your sources and then weave it in to the paper thoughtfully so that it all flows well and makes sense. It's challenging to do this if you don't take notes from your sources. So let me explain how I take notes when I write a research paper. First, I use index cards, and that's because I'm a read-write learner. I remember things by writing them down. It's just how my brain works. So what I do is as I go through my sources and read them, I get out a stack of index cards. And on one side of the card, I'm going to take notes. So let's say I'm reading a 10-page article that I found, and there's a direct quotation that I think I could use in my paper. I will write it down word for word, being very careful to put it in quotation marks so that I know these are not my words. Or maybe I find an idea that I want to paraphrase. So I write it totally in my own words. I don't take some of the writer's wording at all. I completely reword it to avoid plagiarism. Or maybe I do a combination where I paraphrase part and I quote key phrases. But the basic idea is I go through the whole source, the whole 10-page article in this case, and I take notes, either quotations, paraphrases, or a combination. 1 note per card. And let's say I find 7 good little nuggets of information, and I've got 7 index cards for that one source. Then on the back of the card, I write whatever publication information is needed to cite that source in my essay. The author's last name and page number, or if there's no author, the title and page number. If there's no page number, I leave it off, etc. But I give whatever information I would need to cite that in the text of my essay. If I do this for all of my sources, I'll end up with a nice stack of index cards that has all of the most important information from the sources and in the form of either a direct quotation, a paraphrase, or a combination. Now I don't have to search through my sources for good information. I've got it all gathered in one place. Now what I can do is lay it all out in front of me and start combining information that is of the same topic. I can rearrange my ideas, I can bring things together from multiple sources, and I know how to cite my sources and keep track of them. For example, about 5 years ago, I wrote a research paper to present at a popular cultural conference, and I wrote all about that cheesy show, The Bachelor, on ABC, because I used to watch that, and I analyzed how they use fairy tale motifs throughout that show to kind of just keep regurgitating the same formula. Anyway, so in my research, what I did after I had all my notes is I grouped my note cards by topic. Like anything that talked about the Cinderella fairy tale, I put in a stack. Anything that was about Beauty and the Beast, I put in the stack, etc. So that then when I was writing those paragraphs, I had all the pertinent information there for me. So again, I've written a lot of research papers. I strongly suggest that you take notes from your sources, either by using index cards or finding your own way to do this. Several of my students last semester told me that they did this and it helped them immensely. It is going to save you time, pain, and suffering in the long run, and it's worth it. So very important to take notes from your sources. One point to consider and be really careful about as you're taking notes is to make sure that, I'm just going back through, make sure that you're careful about not plagiarizing. And the note-taking phase, if you don't use quotation marks around a quote and later pull it into your paper, that's going to be plagiarism. In the comp class lesson, Avoiding Plagiarism, you'll be learning about Doris Kearns Goodwin, a famous historian, writer, and professor who plagiarized in a couple of her books, and it really tarnished her reputation. And she says that she made a mistake in the note-taking phase. So this is a good example, a cautionary tale of what not to do. So I'm going to pause here, and then we'll talk about basic structure in the next segment.